TCS Live, hockey's premier coaching conference, is coming up June 12th to 14th at the University of Michigan, located in beautiful Ann Arbor. TCS Live is where hockey's top leaders influence the evolution of the game by sharing their experience and expertise with our global community of coaches. Often referred to as the TED Talks of hockey, TCS Live is not your typical coaching clinic. It's an experience that includes keynote presentations, on-ice demonstrations, live interviews, workshops, social receptions, exhibitors showcasing the latest tools and technologies available for coaches, and so much more. It's where passionate coaches like yourself come to learn about the latest trends in the game, connect with coaches from around the world, and most importantly, get inspired to have an even greater impact on the teams and athletes that you lead. Check out our list of current and past presenters. Go to thecoachesitelive.com and make sure you sign up to be notified when new speakers are announced and to receive event updates as we get closer to the big show. If you love coaching, I promise you're going to love attending TCS Live. And best of all, because you're tuning into the GLASSANDOUT podcast, we're going to save you $100 on the cost of your ticket. Simply enter the coupon code GLASSANDOUT at checkout. Also, if you're a coach from Canada or the US, you will receive continuing education credits on behalf of Hockey Canada or USA Hockey. So make sure to let your association know, as this is part of maintaining your coach certification. Join myself and our Coach Site community at TCS Live, June 12th, 14th at the University of Michigan. It's an absolute blast. I'll see you there.
So I'd be curious to know, as we sit here today at the end of April, when does training camp start for you?
For us, it's beginning of August. Like this year, that's kind of the standard in Europe, right? We start early.
And so, in some countries or some leagues would start even earlier, would they not?
Oh yeah, no, the KHL, it's crazy. Beginning of July.
And just to be clear, from a timeline, like you start in the beginning of August, when would the regular season start?
That'd be mid-September. We still put in a full 5-6 week camp.
Would it be fair to say there's not a players union in the DEL?
That would be very fair to say. And that's especially when North Americans are fresh, they first come over and they're like, there's no such thing as the 3 hours in the rink. Like they're at the rink as long as I want them to be at the rink. And it's, we got stuff to do. We do it.
How much of that is influenced by, I know in Wolfsburg, you guys are sponsored by Volkswagen and you had shared that that's where like their head office is. Is that
that's the world headquarters is based in Wolfsburg.
And, I know that, Red Bull sponsors a team. I'm assuming there's other kind of major, SAP, I believe is involved, but how much of that, I guess, mindset do you think comes from some of these sponsors saying, hey, like, I've got a job and I work 8 hours a day and you've got a job and you're going to work 8 hours a day. And, we're going to put our best foot forward here.
I think that's Aaron, that's part of it, but it's also tradition. And I'll say just like old ways of thinking, it takes time to change it. Right. And when I first went over to Europe, that was 25 years ago. I mean, camp was 7 weeks. Like it was crazy. And so even now, when we say the camp is 5 or 6 weeks, the first week is, getting their new equipment. We do, our headshots, our the press is involved, our merchandising. The league sends out photographers for the player cards. There's a lot of other stuff going on. We go through our fitness testing. The first time we actually get on the ice is actually probably about 6 days after everybody lands. But we have to go through this whole rigmarole just to kind of get the whole operation in gear. And so you have your kind of standard. There's a template that we use. But I mean, training camp, and the ironic part is even with that 6 week training camp, we only play 7 exhibition games. That depends on what the coach and the GM think is best for the preparation of the team. But I'm of the opinion more than 8 games it's just too much. I want the guys fresh and kind of hungry when that first regular season game starts. And so we try to limit it to 7.
So it's so interesting because on the other end of the spectrum, you have the National Hockey League, where I sense that if you polled most coaches in that league, they'd probably say, gosh, I'd love an extra week at camp, or, I'd love to not play my 7 exhibition games within a 2-week window, sometimes having games simultaneously in different cities. What's the advantage of having a longer training camp?
Just truly having your team all on the same page.
Yeah.
And in certain seasons, for example, last year, I think we only brought in 4 new guys, which was great. So that made preseason relatively simple because the vast majority of our team had played on our team the year before, obviously, knew our systems, knew each other. There was a comfort level and understanding of the way we wanted to play. But then this year, for example, we're bringing in 12 new guys. And so even as a coach, I'm looking forward to having that extra time because when we hit the ground running, we need to be on the same page. And with a 2-week, bringing in 12 new guys with the NHL system, for example, I mean, that'd be almost impossible. It'd be controlled chaos out on the ice for the first few weeks until you got your team really playing the way you wanted them to.
I wonder, just as you say this, and I'm sure there's always examples on let's say either end of the spectrum, but is there maybe something that's refreshing about going into camp with 12 new players? And just the fact that players are going to show up in the dressing room, and maybe there's a sense of a bit more internal competition, or maybe there's a sense of just people, you know, they haven't found their spot in the lineup, so some of the new players are going to bring a bit more enthusiasm to find their way, and maybe that spreads in a positive way amongst the entire group.
I think that's fair because it's fresh and new. And sometimes, I mean, even just with our construct, Aaron, I thought we had a real window to not just compete, but compete for a championship. And that window is gone. That window is gone. And that's kind of the reason why we're bringing in 12 new guys. And it's a restart. For me as a coach, it's a challenge because even with that, it sounds funny, but even with that many new players and 6 weeks or say 5 weeks of training camp and exhibition games and more than enough time to practice, we're still not really pumping on all cylinders until probably November. It takes a long time to get everybody integrated, but the opportunity even in having this year, to be honest, we had big ambitions and we didn't reach our goals. It gives us a chance, and after, as depressing as that is and as tough as it is, it makes the life of a coach and of a professional hockey player. It's not all unicorns and rainbows, and once you get over that, you realize, okay, we're in a position for a new start, and bringing in something fresh, some new people, some new energy. That's a very positive thing. Once we get our lineup done, then it's going to be on me and my staff to make sure that everybody's playing together and we set our goals and we establish our identity. The culture kind of comes from, it's established. So I've been there long enough. But with new people, even us as coaches, we need to be flexible. How does this work? What are we? And it's going to take a while to identify what are we this year, because it's going to be different than what we have been in the past 4 seasons.
When I look back at your tenure in Wolfsburg and then, prior to your arrival, and again, this is just based solely on the standings. My observation is that, Wolfsburg maybe traditionally had been one of the teams that generally finished in the bottom half of the standings. You come in and the team goes on a really good 3-year run of being in the top quarter to top third of the standings. You had a couple playoff runs. As you said, you go into this year with really high expectations. The team maybe doesn't meet those. So when the season wraps up, what's the process? Because I mean, everybody listening to this knows what it's like. Like when the season's on, you're just focused on what's 6 inches in front of your face most of the time. But with the benefit of hindsight, how do you go back and reflect on the season and try and pull out perhaps things that need to be changed, but also make sure that you don't lose sight of the things that maybe are working?
Yeah, that's a really good point because you don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? And one of the things I think I told you the last time we talked, one of the great things about being a hockey coach is you don't have to sit at your computer and write reports for hours on end.
Yeah.
That's a standard after our season's over. It's been quite easy the previous 3 seasons because we had a certain level of success and we liked the direction we were going. We were bitterly disappointed we didn't win the championship, but we thought, okay, we're not far off. So writing those reports, it's simple. We all have bosses. I have a GM. We have a board of directors directly from Volkswagen that we have to answer to. But this year, I mean, it was 8 straight days of writing reports, studying analytics, going over stats, going through individual personal reviews of each player. We did that with our staff as well. And those are standards. But this year, when it doesn't go your way, I mean, we wanted to go deep into it. And for me as a coach, a little OCD. I think a lot of us have that. I needed to understand. And you've got your eye test, you've got your gut feeling, but and through the season we work with a lot of analytics, and we obviously we talk about everything. But to be able to sit down there and concentrated in front of my computer, going through all of these things and understanding, okay, this is why we didn't have success, this is why we didn't land where we wanted to land. And then how do we fix this? What are the pieces that aren't working? How do we replace them? Because shortly after the season, then we have exit meetings, right? And then you're talking about contract extensions, staying, going, which is terribly emotional. I mean,
Totally,
I think you work day in, day out with these guys, and I forget how tough it is. One of the things I promised myself when I got done playing is I'd never forget how hard it is to be a pro hockey player. Like the stresses are huge. You've got coaches breathing down your neck. You've got management. You've got fans. You've got press. Same time, most of our guys were in the kind of the NHL players' age. A lot of them are starting families, right? They're getting married. They're starting families. There's pressures from all over the place. And that's why even in European hockey, this is a little aside, but you see that the coaching staffs it's become so much more professional in the last 25 years since I started going over to Europe. That was in 2000. Like we have a mental coach. We have a full-time performance coach. We've got, my assistant coach is our goalie coach. It's our two equipment guys, our team of physios. And you need that today in order to be able to get the players out there, have them focused, feeling good about themselves, feeling healthy and ready to go, but then also up here. And that's why even our mental coach plays a huge role by us, because that's stuff that you and I have never studied. We're not competent. And to be honest, we don't have time for it. So I'm a big believer. And hockey is one of the last bastions in pro sports where I think, our culture is hard-headed. It's like, wipe a little bit of dirt on it and let's go.
Yeah,
and
totally.
and life pressures more than actual hockey pressures, I think, affect young athletes right now more than ever. And so I'm kind of rambling right now, but us coming back into, we have our post-mortem, we do an autopsy on the season, every player, the staff, what could we have done better? What did we do really well? What didn't we do well? And how do we move forward? And that's part of the coming back to the training camp thing. It's all part of the European construct. And from league to league, it's a bit different, Aaron. But, I've been in Austria and Germany now for, quarter of a century. I know how it kind of ticks, and I know what the expectations are. And, I've been fortunate that, you need a certain amount of arrogance or self-confidence as a coach, but you can never stop learning. And you turn that evaluator's eye back on yourself, and there's always a few things you could probably do better as well. And that's part of my growth, and in particular for my staff, that we keep moving forward and we don't get caught thinking that we're doing everything just right, and that our development, not just our players, we're always focused on the development of our players and by extension our team, but we need to keep growing and keep learning as well. I think it's a huge component.
Lots to unpack there, and I want to just start with this idea of the analysis, or as you said, post mortem on the season, and part of it is because when I started the coaches site, I came from a hockey background, and I didn't, I was the least qualified person in the room to start a business. And but one of our board members, Trent, like we would do, whether it was our conference or sort of other activities, he would say, "Hey, did you do a post-mortem analysis of it?" And I'm like, "No." Like I said, I know how it was. It was good, or it was bad, or it was okay. Like it's all up here. It's between the ears. I got this. And he's like, no, you need to write it down. He goes, if you don't write it down, it doesn't exist. And he said, the process of you doing that, you're gonna uncover, you're gonna grow as a person. You're gonna grow as a leader, because you're gonna just through the process of reflecting and putting it down and organizing it on paper. It didn't make sense in the moment, but after going through it a few times, it made all kinds of sense. And I now it's just become such a big part of our organizational routine, I guess. And so, I'd be curious, like without getting too much in the weeds, but for example, you mentioned the analytics. Can you give any examples of what you might learn, or things that you said, "Hey, I thought things were I thought it was orange, but it turned out it was gray."
Yeah,
And
for us, okay, just specific to us this year, all of a sudden we started the season, we had the best PK in the league. This is just one part of it from
Yeah.
many. Okay. But then all of a sudden we were banging around 91% after 12 games. And then all of a sudden we're sitting at 84%. So we're still second in the league, which is statistic wise. You look at the lists, no,
Yeah.
geez, we're still second or third, think, well, no, I mean, we had to break that down. We went 10 games where our PK was at like 68%, Aaron. We
Yeah.
went from dominant to, truly awful that quickly. But it gets lost in the weeds. There's so many other things going on. And
Totally, yeah.
And maybe the PK wasn't losing games for us, so it wasn't our focus, but it obviously wasn't good enough. And then, I feel like coaches at all levels, you're sticking your thumb, you're sticking your finger in a bunch of different leaks in the dam, right? You think you've got one specific area in your game under control. So to be honest, and it was on the guys, which was great. We identified the problem. We laid out video, some solutions. To be honest, some of the players that played PK didn't play that much for the next 5 games. So we changed the personnel a little bit. And by emphasizing that and putting focus on it, it got the guys and us focused back on what's important, what's absolutely necessary during penalty killing. And yeah, we fixed it. All of a sudden, for the next 10 games, we were at 87%. But then it dipped again. But that's my point. You think you fix one thing, you stick your finger in that part of the dam, and then all of a sudden it's leaking over here. And I think that's part of coaching these days, right? And it's whether it be analytics or stats or even your gut feel. And a good friend of mine, I was lucky enough to work for Hockey Canada staffs in the past. So
Yeah.
Team Canada came over to Europe, and Mishkov, he was the first analytics coach for Las Vegas when they came into the league. And Donskov, excuse me. And he was with Team Canada. He came over, and this was new. This is, probably 10 years ago, something like that. So I'm in his ear the whole week that we're together. And he has a hockey background as well, Aaron. And he said, Mike, this is the interesting part of analytics. It's great, but it'll never replace your eye test and your gut test. A lot of times it'll confirm what you see because of your experience and you've been around long enough. But every once in a while, it'll be an aha moment. And you're like, didn't see that. And then that redirects your focus and you have a chance to fix it. And as coaches, we're professional criticizers and we're repairmen. This is what we do for a living. And so with Misha, he just said, analytics are incredibly useful, but you can't base every decision just on the analytics. So that kind of melding of the two things, like luckily, you have experience in hockey, you've seen a lot, you have to use outside the box thinking at times, but to have those numbers, especially when the sample's big enough, they don't lie. And so they can either confirm what you already knew, or they can kind of redirect your focus. And I like that a lot because that's also expanding your horizons and learning something new and having to dive deep into whatever situation your team has, whatever situation my team has. Everybody's got it, and it's a constant flux. And that's why, honestly, I love coaching because it's never boring. There's always, even when it's going pretty good, there's always something. There's personal drama. There's one part of your game that's a team that's not very good. Certain players, ice time plays a huge role on the mood of your players. And certain players, even if the team's going pretty well, you're going to have players that aren't happy. And so it's constantly working with them and redirecting their focus into controlling what they can control. Not, I love this from John Tortorella. I had him as a coach, by the way, before he made the jump to the NHL with Tampa.
Where was that?
I had him in Rochester.
No way. Okay.
Yeah, and he was awesome. And I saw a press conference of his a number of years ago, and I've used it. He says, what player X? Why isn't he playing power play? And Torts looks at the report and says, that's a really good question. I don't know why he's not playing power play. He was playing power play. He wasn't very good at it. And at the end of the day, I tell my players, this is Torts again, he was a beauty. Says, I don't control their ice time. They control their ice time. If you do the right things at the right time for me and the team, your ice time goes up. You will be rewarded. You don't, it goes the other direction. The ice time's in their hands. And I thought that was that's a different way of looking at it as well.
Absolutely. And I'd just be curious if we go back to your analogy of being a mechanic, and you mentioned focus a lot, like how much of your role, and I think especially coaching's evolved because there's way more things we can measure now. So that means there's way more things we can focus on. But what hasn't changed is there's 24 hours in a day, or you're probably only practicing for, I don't know, like 90 minutes tops. So how much of your job is to sort of sift through all that information and say, hey, we could focus on 10 different things today in our game, but we're going to focus on this thing? Like, how much of your just is coaching is just a daily act of triage and saying, hey, there's a lot of shit going on, but we're going to pick the one thing that we think has
Amen.
the
And
biggest
that's
impact.
when we get together every morning. We'll talk about it before we go home that night, but with my staff. And
Yeah.
the next morning we come in, and our guys, we have a really strict routine with our team. Because in Europe you typically have more time to practice in the NHL. So practice, it's like college hockey, right? Typically you're playing Friday, Sunday. We'll mix in probably 6 or 7 weeks a year where we actually play three or four times a week, which is an interesting test in and of itself. But as a rule, practice plays a huge role. But we have active warm-ups before every practice. We have video before every practice. After twice a week we have active lifts, whether it be explosiveness or upper body, whatever it is. But my message to the guys is, at the end of the day, we're hockey players. And when we go out for practice, with my staff in the morning, what's our focus today? What haven't we been doing well? And we have that conversation. We mix it in. And that's okay. That's our focus. But it might only be one drill in it. But
Yeah.
we communicate that to the guys. And and I'm not reinventing the wheel here, but every drill that we go out there, I have a specific way that I like practices to roll out so that they flow together. We hang up our practice before every ice time, which is also nothing new, but I expect my guys to know it inside and out. The only reason I stop in between drills is to bring their pulse back down. I believe, hockey players are sprinters. They're not marathon runners, and we want to practice that way. But, and this is just the message to my guys is, I need you, even when you're lifting weights and doing your warm up and everything, you don't have to be totally dialed in. You don't, right? But when we're on the ice, we're practicing with purpose. I need you dialed. Is it always possible? No, but that's where our coaching staff, we demand it, and guys need a little pat on the butt once in a while. Like, hey, we're out here for a reason. We got big weekend coming, or a huge game against a team right behind us or right ahead of us. Use whatever motivation you can to get them dialed in and focused. Like, I'm a big believer in that. Like, we need to dial in and be hyper vigilant for these 60 minutes, 65 minutes. And then after that, we go through our routine every day, which is tough, but I like consistency. So every day looks the same, only the content is different. Like, our meetings are at 9:00, our videos at 9:15. Be it 8:30, and then the workouts before practice and after practice, they're listed. We have our group chat, and it goes out every night, so everybody knows exactly what the next day is going to look like. And on the flip side, I don't want my guys in the rink for 7 hours a day. We cram all of that in about 4 hours. But I need my guys paying attention. This is what we do for a living, and let's work together towards achieving a common goal.
How do you like practice to roll out?
For me,
Yeah.
we all have mentors, right? I'm sure there's a couple of guys
there's like 1 degree of seven. I would just like going back to elite prospects, so many familiar faces that we've worked with. So,
and Rob Dahm is one of my mentors, and his resume is really interesting as far as, and I get it. In North America, we get focused on NHL and hockey that's happening over here. But Rob Dahm has coached in the WHL. He was 10 years at U of A, winning championships there. He was a coach in the American League. He coached in the NHL. He's been over in Europe. This guy has touched a lot of different leagues and seen a lot of different stuff. And in Europe, a lot of times, so for me, I've been learning by doing. Aaron, he was one of my first mentors where I actually trusted to reach out and pick his brain.
How did you get connected originally?
Originally, it was through the HP1 program here in Alberta.
Oh, no way.
He was speaking. That was my first year as a head coach. And I was the student listening to him talk, but we were coaching against each other in the same league. He was in Linz in Austria at that time.
No way.
So I called him in the summer, and coming back to how I like practice to roll out, the team in Linz the 1 year from the first game of the season until the last, they were in first place. They ripped through the playoffs. They won a championship. And I'm like, Dahmer, how did that happen? How did you do that?
No
He goes, we were great at 2-on-1s. And I'm like, pardon? He says, we were excellent at 2-on-1s. I go, what does that mean? And it's not straight up and down the ice 2-on-1s, but he said our execution in 2-on-1s and creating 2-on-1s all over the ice was the best in the league. And we scored so many goals off the rush, creating little 2-on-1s down low in the offensive zone, coming out of corners. And he said, well, we practice, and it's been a thing of his that I stole from him. They practice 2-on-1s every single day. A lot of times two 2-on-1s, because there's different variations. There's the ones coming down the ice, 2-on-1s, one D-man, two forwards, and the kind of your standard. But then there's, rollbacks out of the corner. How do you create those little 2-on-1s down low? How are you releasing from net front and you pick up a reset behind the net? You manage to pull that off the wall clean, and you got a guy in the slot. That's also a 2-on-1, right? You're trying to create these little moments where guys have to read and react, find the soft spots, because there's a lot of traffic out there these days. Team defense is excellent throughout professional hockey now, and so I stole it. Another one of my mentors, and I've only had really the two, was Larry Huras. And he told me years ago, he says, Mike, a good coach is a great thief. You see something you like, whether it's a system or a practice or a drill, you take it, you make it your own, but you show a little respect. So if I saw a 2-on-1 from you, it'd be the Aaron or the TCS 2-on-1,
Sure.
because we all give, every drill has its own specialized name.
So is part of the lesson there, I guess, Mike, not that you got to be good at 2-on-1s, but there's value in finding like your superpower as a team. Like, what's the one thing we're going to just be excellent at? And that's going to be kind of part of our, I guess, identity.
Yeah. And for me at that time, it was also, before analytics was a thing, and before hockey's been, I don't want to say how it's so specified now, right? And you pick out your forecheck, your neutral zone, your D zone coverage, like that varies a little bit. But the little intricate things in the middle of the game, that's where coaches, I think, they put their accent on it. And so even Rob Dahm talking to me about 2-on-1s, I mean, that was not even within my vocabulary. A straight up 2-on-1, yes, but all these little ones in the O zone, creating those little moments. When you think about it, even a D zone swarm, that's a 2-on-1, but it's on the defensive side of things, right? You want to jump that guy, you get your pin, your centerman jumps in there, or the low forward, or even the net front D-man. And so just different thinking. And I think one of the benefits of learning by doing, like I started at zero. Like I fell into coaching, Aaron. I didn't know that I didn't plan on this. When I got done playing, I wanted to be a lawyer. But all of a sudden I fell into coaching, and what is that now? 16 years ago now. And learning by doing, but by not growing up as a coach under very strict guidelines. I learned from this guy. I studied, how are things done, and my name equity was in Europe at that time. So coaching over here in North America, I mean, it's if you're doing it the hard way, like coming up through junior B, getting the dub, making your way up, I have a ton of respect for that. The flip side is ex-players, we get to jump ahead at the line, but then you sink or swim. There's no, you get your first job, and then you got to show you have aptitude and you're competent in what you do, or else there's just the ejector seat it can get pretty hot pretty quickly, especially in Europe.
I mean, yeah, that's obvious, and something we've come to appreciate. So with all that being said, like when you look at practice, how you run a practice today, how much different is it? I mean, do you think, or how much different do you think it would be versus if you came up through North America, like having finished playing in Europe, having mentors that had been coached in Europe? Like, what are maybe some of the tenets of your practice where you're like, that probably isn't like that unless I have the lived experience
We've ended up meeting in the middle. And again, being with those Hockey Canada, those Team Canada staffs, Dave King was the head coach of one. I mean, Aaron.
He's the best.
He's the best. I was 16 years old, and he pulled me out for a camp with the old year-round national team. Like, he's been in my sphere since I was a child, more or less. And to come full circle and be able to coach with him and pick his brain, it was awesome. And so, long story short, even talking to Dave King, I said, this makes me feel so good, because the stuff that you do, that's what I do. Or, it might be a little bit of a different wrinkle on it, but I made it up myself because it made sense. But then you have pros that have gone through, Dave King, I mean, that's decades of coaching, and that have been exposed to the latest and greatest ideas. They've refined it to a point where, that was the extra cherry on top for me as far as my knowledge. I had the broad strokes of made it up by myself kind of thing and got there, whether it's the way you present video, for me, okay. And now just the difference between when I was a player into now, I mean, the first 3 drills when I was playing, that was warm up, like an actual warm up. There were no dynamic warm ups with our performance coach before practice. You had a heat pack on and a cup of coffee and doing the crossword before we got out for practice. And now we jump on and there's 2 warm-up drills. Our goalies get 15 minutes of dedicated goalie time with their goalie coach beforehand. So they're already warm. We don't need to hit them in the chest or hit them in the pads with shots. 2 high tempo, focus on passing, shooting, regroups. Then we get in, there's always the 2-on-1, straight up 2-on-1 every day.
Yeah.
And then we broaden that out to whether it's defensive work or dynamic. We try to transition from our D zone, jump into our swarm, escape to the weak side behind the net. My 2 forwards in the corner with the system we play, I have them blow the zone. We have 1 guy on the wall for support, but I like to get up the ice quickly. And that's the different kind of flavors that you pick up over the years. And
Sure.
I've studied different systems from different countries, and that's a good thing about Europe. You get to see what's kind of the trend in Sweden, what's the trend in Finland, what's the trend here or there. And then you kind of discard what you don't like, and I really like that. You implement it, and all of a sudden it becomes yours. Got to be a good thief.
I want to ask you, you talked about sort of the college type of schedule that you guys have over there. So I'd be curious, you'd be a great person to ask this question to. So Gary Bettman is likely on his way out as the NHL commissioner sooner than later. I want that job. And the reason I want that job is because I believe, and I probably, the owners would probably kick me out within the first week for saying this, but I think the NHL product would be greatly enhanced if we said, you can only play on average 2.5 games a week. Like maybe you got to play a bit more when you're on the road out east or something like that. But in my opinion, if you could shave a minimum of 20 games off the schedule, the regular season would go up. The game would get way more compelling. You still have the playoffs because those are great. But you guys, I believe, play 52 regular season
Correct.
games. And is it more or less it's 2 a week? Like clockwork?
As a rule, Aaron, but a lot of times, I mean, sometimes we'll play 5 and 10 nights because.
Oh, really? Just because
that's the weird thing with Germany and with Austria in particular. You get to Christmas time, and that's where our fans have time to be in the rink.
Sure. Okay.
Right. So then we're playing every other day. But as a rule, for probably half the season, we're playing Friday, Sunday.
Got it. And how much does that, like, just from a performance standpoint, how much does that enhance the product versus if you played an 80 games?
100%. So again, my wife always says my short story long. Yes, I totally. You take the financial side of it in the NHL out of the picture. I'm with you, right? But that's why it'll never happen. But like I played 8 years in the minors over here, and that first 20 games, you guys see it, and you're watching NHL all the time. That first 20 games, it's awesome. The NHL is back. Everybody's excited. The fans are excited. The players are excited. And then you get those dog days, right? Game number 20 to game number 60. And it's a tough grind for those guys. They're flying all over the place. They're playing 3 times a week. And then the last 20 games of an NHL season, everybody gets horny again, and everybody with playoff positions. We're getting close to, making the playoffs, being out of the playoffs, winning the division, whatever the case may be. And all of a sudden you can see the focus, the energy. So with us coming back to that, it puts a lot of pressure on the guys because there aren't many dog days. Like every game feels like it's important. And that difference, we bump along almost at the same pace as the NHL. From mid-September, we start a little bit earlier until the beginning of January. And then around game number 40 for us, 40 for the NHL. That's where their schedule, we're winding down. There's a lot of people over here, and I talk to my friends about how big the World Championships are in Europe. So every league in Europe has to be done 9 days before the World Championships start. That's why we start early, but we finish early because it has to be done before a week before the World start. Every league has to be done. And that's why I presented it for Hockey Alberta years ago, and just to put it in perspective, at that time, this is a number of years ago, but roughly 450 million people view the NHL playoffs. NHL playoffs last roughly 10 weeks. Those numbers might be a little bit different. They're a little outdated, might be outdated, but roughly. The World Championships in 17 days has a total viewership of 1.2 billion.
Are you serious? I've never heard that stat. That's wild.
It's unbelievable. And that's, I mean, the money that goes into the different federations in Europe and how big it is. And it goes at the same time as the NHL playoffs. So that's, I'm a Canadian. I never, watch the occasional World Championship game. If it happened to be on TV, it's on in the morning, right? Yeah. Because we got the NHL playoffs to watch. But when I'm in a mood, I'll watch 2 World Championship games in the morning and then 2 NHL playoff games at night. And it's just a hockey nerd's dream. Oh, it's awesome.
I'm heading over there. We sponsor they do the coaching symposium every year. And so this will be my first time in Stockholm, but I've told so many people, I'm like, there's a lot of great events. Like I would say, and I feel like I've checked most of the boxes with the exception of the Spangler Cup. Haven't done that. I've heard that's amazing. But I'm like, as far as a fan experience, there's nothing that compares to the World Championships. And the game's one thing, but it's everything that, like, in that city, like the whole city's invested in it. And you just see what's great about it is, like I can remember in, where were we? Copenhagen, and which isn't your traditional hockey city, but it was like taken over. And I would get up in the morning and to go get a coffee and a croissant, and there'd be a couple of Latvian fans just like sleeping against the cobblestone after a big night. By the way, arguably nobody loves hockey more than the Latvians.
It's crazy. Hey, yeah. The Belarusians,
yeah,
they're something else as well. I mean, that's one of the, and that gets lost in the shuffle over here in North America, which sure. I understand. The NHL is the biggest and best league in the world. Yeah. But there's a lot of hockey outside of our borders that is really, really interesting, highly entertaining. The fan culture over there, you experienced it. It's just it's a whole different world.
Well, so on the fan culture side, so I look at just in doing research for this conversation, was looking at the DL and the size of the stadiums all over the map. I think you guys are 4,600.
Yeah, the biggest one of the smaller ones
is 1,800. And so my first question was, like, there must be a revenue sharing or a salary cap to level out. There's not.
It's against EU law. Can't do it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So okay. No salary cap. I don't know the answer to this, but like, so if I'm, is there any limit to what you can pay a player?
No, I have a limit.
You have, so there's internal budgets, but theoretically, if Sidney Crosby woke up tomorrow and said, you know what, I want to play in Germany next year, all bets are off. Like it's
wide open. And that's one of the ways, and each league over here is a little bit different, but we're all governed by EU law. And so I think I told you the have and the have-nots in the DEL, they're it's very distinct. And even going to the size of the arenas. In Cologne, it's the biggest ice hockey stadium outside of the NHL. It seats 18,600. We've got a few at 15, 14,000, 12,500, 10, all the way down to one. Our rink is one of the smallest. I think the smallest is maybe 4,400. So from 4,400 up to 18,600. And then you get the budgets involved. And so the budgets being the budgets, the have and have nots are distinct, as I said, but they've tried to regulate, give at least every team at least a fighting chance. So we're allowed, I believe it's 34 licenses per year. Okay, so you can't sign more than 34 players. There's a bunch of caveats on that one. But in particular, you have your German contingency, and then you have your imports. And so you're allowed 11 licenses, import licenses per year. Okay. And different teams have different construct. If they've got some really good German talent, they'll start the season with 6 or 7 imports. Our standard has been 9 imports. And then with our German players, we bring them all together and off we go. Because with the 11 licenses, when beginning of the season, if your 9 imports stay healthy, one's held for a goalie in case your number one goalie. That's the holy card. You don't give that one up unless you have to. In case your number one goalie hurts himself before the transfer deadline, which is mid-February. And then the other one, we can react. We can be flexible. If a D-man goes down, we can replace him with a D-man or with a forward. Because before that was brought in, the have teams, like you brought in 9 imports and 4 of them you didn't like at the beginning of the season, you just fire them and bring in another 4. Whereas the teams that are financially a little bit more constricted, they can't do that. So it formed an unfair playing field.
It's still have to pay out the term on the contract. Got it.
So if I licensed you, Aaron, on the first game of the season, okay, you hurt yourself, you're out for the season after game number 2. That card is burned. We cannot recoup that. So you're allowed the 11 import licenses. And then even with the German contingency, it's really hard to find. Like during the season, all the best Germans are already signed. They've got term. They're making good money. It's you having to deal with what the cards that you're dealt during a season. And if you have bad luck with your injuries, man, that is an uphill battle.
So I guess with that being said, is it similar to soccer or football where, I mean, do you guys have a youth system where you're developing your own players to eventually play on the professional team, or how do you acquire German talent?
We end up having to go out of town. Okay. Our minor hockey program in Wolfsburg, it's healthy. And we have, I think, around 205 kids, but it's not as strong. So even the different levels that they play at. So our under 20 and under 17, they play in the 3rd division in Germany.
I see.
And other hockey cities in Germany have a really deep tradition, and they have hockey academies like Berlin, Mannheim, sure. Munich with Red Bull. They've built an academy down in Salzburg, the Red Bull Academy, that they'll send their young youth players to. And they develop. The programs are amazing. They're very, very good. So for us, we have to outsource. We're typically we don't have homeboys in our team. Whereas, and in Bavaria, down where Munich and Ingolstadt and Augsburg and Straubing are, that's kind of the power corner of where the most German hockey players are produced. There are players produced out of the Ruhr Valley, like around Cologne, Dusseldorf. Berlin produces quite a few players. But as a rule, the majority come from Bavaria. So they have kind of like a home advantage when it comes to younger players that are coming up through the system.
I mean, that, as you describe that seems like an unbelievable advantage. And so with that being said, I guess, would it make sense that if you guys identify or you're able to recruit a German player, like I'm sure there's a huge emphasis on the imports because they've got to be impactful, but probably just as much to, like, if you can get your hands on a good homegrown player, keeping them under contract probably is equally, if not more valuable.
Well, that's well said. And one of the development tools that has been, I'll say, forced on the DEL, but from the German Federation, is that on each DEL team, we have 3 under 23 players. Okay. Where you position them, you can have 2 under 23 defensemen or 2 up front. We're typically 2 up front, 1 D-man in the back. Those spots are saved for under 23 players. So for us, with our budget and having to recruit younger players to come to Wolfsburg, we typically sign 4. 1 we put in the Oberliga, in the 3rd league, in the Oberliga to develop. The other 3 stay with us. And we're trying to turn them into pros on the quick, right? Like they're playing against men. The DL is one of the best leagues in the world. And so just as an example, a lot of those guys, when they get done with the under 23 rule, then they're in the open market, right? In the jungle where you either sink or swim. And so for us, perfect example, we had a young player at 20 came to us from Landshut, Bavaria, injured himself, but we were able to work with him up through his under 23, and he's 6'1", Aaron, right-handed, shoots the puck a ton, moves well, good kid, good attitude, and he developed as a man. They come to us as kids, right? They're built like kids. And then we gave him another contract after the under 23 rule because he had earned it and he was a DL player. Well, then one of the big boys came and gave him term and more money than we could spend. So we developed this player up through the ranks, 4 years long. And then poof, all of a sudden he's gone and he's helping out one of our competitors that has more money and deeper pockets than we do. So that's kind of the battle that we have. And there are a bunch of different levels that we're working on as coaching, which is a real test, because we do have these kids. They're kids. One kid, Timo Rukdesho, that we brought in, it was kind of an experiment. All right, we've identified him. He's one of the best in his year. He played German under 18, under 20. He was actually with the German under 20 team over here playing against Canada, and all the big boys did a good job. But he's not ready to play in the DEL at 19. So we parked him in the third league. He gets to play PP, plays PK, has a chance to work on himself. It's the first time he's ever had to work in the gym. So our performance coach is working with him throughout the season.
And is your
your
DL3 team nearby?
It is Hanover, only an hour away.
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
So that's our cooperation. Some teams use a DL2, a second league team is their cooperation partner. We go a step further and go with the third league, because then we know our players are going to get opportunity when they go play there.
Got it. So, I don't know why. All I can think about right now is Ted Lasso and just sort of because you guys are also dealing with relegation, but just that sort of concept of being a small market team that you got to be different. Like if you try and do it like, all the contemporaries in your league, you're probably going to fall short. Are you able to give any examples of ways where, whether it's from team construction, perhaps stylistically how you play, but just how you've had to maybe zig while others zag?
Yeah, I think that's, I don't want to say a battle. I think in order to, we're ambitious. It's not just being competitive. We want to be competitive, but
you've had a lot of success there.
We did. And you know what? We were close, and that's the bittersweet part of it. But that's across the board in pro hockey, right? But for us, yeah, I mean, even system wise, to be honest, our decor, like I've got a couple puck movers and the other ones are bruisers. Good defenders, move their feet well, aren't the best friends with the puck.
Yeah.
But then our whole system would be, if, on a chip in, we're going back to break the puck out. Like we'd have four guys like basically surrounding the puck. Like I want that puck out of my D-man's hands into my forward's hands as quickly as possible. Okay. And to simplify things. And so my weak side winger, if we turn up the strong side, my weak side winger, boom, I want you out of the zone. We call it push the pace slash. It's, again, other teams use it, but your goal is that strong side far blue line. We're going to overload that one half of the ice. Wherever the puck is, we're going to have all five guys there, and we're going to stretch you out. So if my D-man picks up the puck, doesn't see an easy pass, we call it an airmail. We transfer that puck off the glass or a high flip and airmail out to the neutral zone. My weak side winger's already got a head start. He's pushed that weak side, their weak side D-man out of the zone, and we're pushing up the ice, hopefully with the idea that we're going to be first on the puck, and then everybody's playing catch up. But we're playing percentage hockey, right? It's like going to Vegas. We want to get out of our zone as quickly as possible. We don't care how. So that's just one example of like, what team do you have? How can we maximize what we have? And also, if I'm being honest, we're a big bruising team, and other teams don't like to play. We play in your face hockey. I got guys that can hit like trucks. I got guys that fight like back in the 80s. And yeah, we try to, play we call it Grizzly hockey, and you're going to feel us. Yeah.
How appropriate is that? How do the fans react over there? Because, I sense that the truculence that, we have come to appreciate in North America and identify with the game, that maybe that doesn't always play the same to the fans.
That's the beautiful thing about Germany. They love it.
Do they? Amazing.
Yeah. And, we've, even the German league, I think it's fair to say it's changed a little bit, but I'll stick with this theme, is it was the heaviest of the European leagues.
Got it.
A lot of North Americans in the league, a lot of coaches, a lot of GMs, a lot of even the German GMs and the German coaches. They've either been trained, been schooled in the North American way of doing things. And we have a separate set of rules in the DEL from the IHF, because it was identified that our fans in Germany, they enjoy the rough stuff. They want to see hits. They want to see guys in each other's faces. And if we don't do that, with soccer being as big as it is, Aaron, in Germany, it dwarfs everything. Like soccer it's hard to fathom how big it is. Okay. That if we don't have that in our game in hockey, then we're soccer on ice. Who's going to come watch that? So having that kind of heavy truculent, like it's competitive, and it's not just us. That's the way the German league kind of rolls, and it's open. Still have the bigger ice surfaces. The talented guys still have more time and space with the puck to do something. We have significantly, I think it's something like almost 30% fewer faceoffs than in the NHL. So the play is up and
Really?
down.
That's
Yeah,
a
it's
great
back and
stat.
forth.
Man, let's get
Yeah,
more of that.
yeah, no, and this is just my flavor. You talk about how in the NHL. I come back and I love. I mean, I'm addicted to it. Right, I'm watching NHL playoffs every night. But I tell you what, you give McDavid, Draisaitl, take your pick from the talented guys. You give them 15 feet more on each side. That gives them time to do something. That puts them under the what am I trying? It shines a light on their true talent, right? A D-man like take your Hughes, McCarr, take your pick. You give them more time to on their retrievals, and they can shimmy and shake and leave the first forechecker behind and make a great breakout pass. I mean, that's how you enable your stars to shine more. The NHL is not going to do it. You got to take seats out of the rink. But it's a conversation that I've had for years with, and it's my generation that's actually coaching in the American League, in the NHL right now. And so I talked to those guys, and even from the forechecking styles, a few teams in the NHL, they're okay going with a 2-1-2 or a heavy two-man forecheck. But as a rule, they don't like the idea of having guys below the puck. Even with our bigger ice surfaces over there, Aaron, you should see the forecheck. I mean, Munich, my God, it's more aggressive than we go, and we go hard. It's a man on man, 5-man up the ice, get on top of your opponent. They'll have 5 guys below the hash marks on their forecheck.
Second thing I would do as NHL commissioner is I'd knock out 2 rows of seats and make the ice bigger. And I'm convinced that when we've seen best on best, predominantly at the Olympics, which it's been a minute since we've seen that, but when we see the best players in the world competing and it's physical on the big ice and it's combative, like that hockey is that's top in class.
It's
In
pretty
my opinion.
special, isn't it?
It
Yeah.
is. It really is. It really is. What are some of the things like when you're watching, tonight you're going to watch, God, we got a good slate tonight of
Yeah.
games, but what are you watching for, perhaps systematically, like when are you reaching for your notepad and pencil and taking notes? What part of
When
the
I
game
see
really?
something different or interesting that's
Yeah.
effective. So 2 things. There's a system side of it that I
Yeah.
just mentioned, but then the second part is, how do the elite guys, how do they solve problems out there?
Yeah.
And that's the real that separates those guys from, all those guys are playing in the NHL. They're good hockey players, but the elite ones, what they can do out there, it's ungodly at times. And how do they do it? And a lot of it's skill and their IQ and blah, blah, blah. Some of it's learned, right? And that's the age old question. Can you improve ice hockey IQ in players coming up through minor hockey, coming up through development, whether it's junior or college, through the American League, the East Coast League? Can you improve it? I believe yes, but incrementally. And those guys between the escapes, my assistant coach is from Edmonton and has a couple contacts with the Oilers. And just even Draisaitl, when he fires it from just above the goal line, he does that every day. He does that every day. It's not just out of nowhere that he's that precise with his shot. I mean, it's not a surprise to anybody, but that is concentrated, focused practice. And my God, when they pull stuff like that off, and McDavid going 1,000 miles an hour and still being able to control the puck heads up, distribute it, Draisaitl getting somebody on his back and being able to roll off and then toss a backhand sauce pass cross ice for a 1T. I mean, that stuff is just that's awesome to watch. I just love that.
Yeah, the game 4 with the Kings and Oilers, and granted, I haven't sat down and watched too many games, or just haven't had the opportunity to from start to finish. But I watched the majority of that one, and it was funny. I've got a friend he's a Kings fan, and we were texting back and forth. So the next morning, I went back and read the text chain. And it was like the first half of it, we were talking about, the opera. And then the second half, we were talking
Yeah.
about like something completely different. Cause I'm like, the text, and I'm like, dear God, like what just happened? Like Edmonton they like, no, if nobody will beat them if they keep playing like this. And it was amazing to watch. And, I'd be curious. I watched, I believe it was on Wolfsburg. The team put it out, but it was a video of you mic'd up at practice. By the way, pretty sure you spoke about 17 different languages in this like 90-second video. So I don't know how that works, but what was interesting is the video starts out, you're at the board, and I'm paraphrasing here, but you effectively you say, hey, last night's loss, a lot of it had to do with just routine passes breaking down. And we got to get back to passing. And from, again, it's kind of a video that's switching lenses every 5 seconds, but it looked like you did just a very basic sort of passing drill through 3 zones. And, you talk about, Draisaitl, just like that, those shots, those big league plays, those aren't accidents. Those are learned skills. How much of, even in pro hockey, does it come down to just those fundamentals? And one of the key things I've learned as a coach, in doing this show, was with Bruce Cassidy, and he referred to, he's like, even the NHL, he's like, they're like golfers. Like, sometimes you just got to go and get a feel for your wedge. And sometimes he's like, we want to do these big, sometimes you just got to go to get a feel for the puck. You just got to feel it better on your backhand, and that solves everything. And I'd just be curious, where do the fundamentals fit into?
That's a great question. And first off, I need to preface it that I'm a Calgary guy. I am not cheering for the Oilers. I respect beauty and ultra talent when I see it, but it breaks my heart. I'm a Flames fan through and through.
They had a great year.
They really did. Yeah. But back to it, I think it's a huge part of it, Aaron, and in particular with passing. That's another thing that I'm amazed at. Just a little aside, I think it was Connor in Winnipeg going 100 miles an hour through the neutral zone. He was almost right at the red line dot, and Jets went DD. And I mean, this was a rocket pass up the middle on his backhand, and it stuck to his backhand like it was glued there. And that alone, just that little second, I'm like, wow, that's impressive. Because coming back to my guys, we've got guys that have played in the NHL, really good American League players, national team players for Germany. And we talk about it. If we go DD on a regroup and you hit me on the tape, but I can't play it cleanly, well, we're playing in our own zone. On the flip side, we actually have drills where exactly that, we have forwards going up. How many breakaway passes does a forward get on his back, or breakaway passes overall? Not many. If one is hit, if you're hit on the backhand for a breakaway pass and it explodes and you don't get your opportunity, that's on you. So a lot of, and I think that passing is maybe the one thing in pro hockey that it's a lost art form.
I would say, here's my observation from the playoffs. I've counted 3 goals now where it's either been a breakaway or a partial breakaway, but it was a result of an absolutely obscene saucer pass through the neutral zone. It's the type of pass when you and I grew up, they said, hey, you try that again, you're kicked off the team. Yeah. And these players are so damn skilled now, they can make that. And I look at that and I'm like, and my mind instantly goes to, okay, is there a coach out here in the same way you talk about the airmail? Because there was a time when you didn't do that. Is there a coach that's going to say, you know what, our 2-on-1s going to be aerial passes? Yes, that's going to be our thing, and we're gonna be so damn good at that it's going to cause a lot of problems.
100%. And breaking down video, and it was an aha moment for me as I was coming up, because I went from Austria, and my coaching resume was 2 sentences long. I wasn't sure I was going to get another job, and Alfred Fry, my boss in Bremerhaven, I'll always be thankful. He gave me an opportunity there. And we were working on, you've got the broad stroke system stuff, and then you got your special teams. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, I mean, good God, we can't make a 15-foot pass. You're coming up on a 3-on-2, guy in the middle kicks it to the outside and misses him. It's 15 feet, misses him, it's in his skates or it's ahead of him, and kills the opportunity. And creating offense is hard. Like, coming back to what I said, I mean, teams, pro hockey around the world, they play good D, man. You've got, stick on puck, good body position, guys make good reads, taking away pass lanes, blocking shots. It's much different than when I was playing. And just to be able to maximize your time with the puck, you have to be able to pass. And it's not just hitting the tape, it's actually receiving it as well. And it's a flogging a dead horse here, but we do it a lot. I've got a handful of drills that I call pee-wee passing drills. And I do that with my professional team. Mix it in once every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's one-touch passing with speed, or that one that you saw. I know exactly what it is. I divvy up the whole team in the 3 different zones. and I'll toss in 3 pucks. You need to, and you can't carry the puck. You got to get it, have a look around before you get the puck to know where the puck should go. Receive the pass cleanly, move the puck, look for the next pass. And even just little drills like that, it creates awareness. I think it builds IQ. It gives you the reps. You don't get it. We get focused, especially in the pro game. We get focused on, we're going to work on this, like I told you, escaping out of the D zone with a rush up the ice. Then we're going to track back and regroup again. Well, shit, guys need to be able to hit their spots when they shoot. They need to be able to go tape to tape with their passes, and they need to be able to receive a pass. That's the ABCs.
Mike, one thing we do need to touch on is your come up story in the game. Now, I understand you mentioned you're a Flames fan, so I think we can all geographically pinpoint where you grew up.
Yeah.
But my understanding, you grew up on a farm, a ranch?
On a ranch, southeast.
On a ranch.
Yeah.
So you look at, I'm sure growing up, I don't know if there was a fancy painting in the background on the walls on the ranch and all that, collared shirts, but I would just be curious, when you look at, when you look in the mirror, what part of you can you look to and say, yeah, that came from growing up on a ranch?
That's a good point, because it was funny, back then it was pre-computers, pre-video games, everything else. And when you grow up, I live in Calgary now. I'm from Indus, Alberta, but Indus, Alberta is grain elevators, elementary school, 5 houses, a rink, a curling rink. And I think that was it.
I think they got a good wedding venue there too, because I'm pretty sure that's where my brother-in-law got married.
I'll be darned. Yeah, see, it's grown up since then.
Yeah.
And Calgary's gotten so big that it's just outside the city limits now.
Yeah.
But back then it was just a coming together, a meeting place for all the ranchers and all the farmers in the area. So this is the mid 70s. We moved down there. My dad ran a ranch for an oil guy here in Calgary, and the rink itself was built by the farmers and the ranchers. Well, what do they know how to build? Quonsets. They don't know how to build a hockey rink. So it was a massive Quonset. You know what a Quonset is?
I have no idea what a Quonset is.
So imagine an oil barrel. Okay? Yeah. And you cut the oil barrel in half.
Yeah.
And you set half of it up like this with the rounded.
You cut it like down, like north-south. So
right.
It's like, I know exactly what you mean.
And that's where you store tractors and your equipment.
Yeah,
and you probably have your shop in there. And that's what they knew how to build. So they built an oversized Quonset, sprayed it with that. It was probably filled with asbestos. Who knows now? But the white insulation.
Yeah.
And the city teams would come out. They call it the foam dome. And I mean, we could hear other teams crying. They'd wear toques underneath their helmets, and they were crying because it was so cold. Anyways, that's where I grew up playing. And Jake Gosling was a teammate of mine back there. We're the same age. We played baseball, went to school together. His dad, Keith Gosling, coached us for like 6 years, Aaron. And I pulled out my Tiny Mite picture. This was a couple of years ago. I'd totally forgotten. We had 5 forwards, 3 D-men, and 1 goalie. You got enough ice time when you were playing in Indus. That was the team.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And so, we were catching up not too long ago, and I thought there was like something on Elite Prospects that was broken. I was like, it looks like, Mike went from playing midget hockey to Michigan State. And then you're like, no, that's exactly what happened. So you grew up in Innis on your short staff team. At what point do you go to the city and then eventually Michigan State?
Got recruited to come out of the country. And then in between time, it was great. Those programs from Hockey Alberta or Hockey BC, under 15s, under 16 camps, they were always held up at U of A in Edmonton. And so got some exposure there and was recruited to come in as an underage to play AAA midget in Calgary, set up with quadrants. So in the Southeast quadrant, Clint Malarchuk, the NHL goalie, his brother Garth was our coach. And our whole coaching staff, management, and our equipment guys, they were all cops, all Calgary policemen, and they ran a very strict ship. And so played my underage year there. The next year, as a 16, 17 was AAA midget back then, and we ended up winning the Air Canada Cup. It was called back then.
Telescope now, yeah. No way.
And another teammate of mine, Brian Miller, and we had some beauties. We had some great players on that team. Sorry, this is a little aside, but I wanted to say this. I listened to the GLASSANDOUT pod with the Minnesota high school coach, and you said you went down there, and it just reminded me, like, especially as a Western Canadian, like I heard about high school, Minnesota high school, but when you're in the middle of that, Like that's as big and as cool as it gets, right? Doesn't matter if it was back in the 80s, like Minnesota hockey was still big. When we won the AAA midget, we thought we were the cocks of the walk, man. Like that was as big and as good as it was ever going to get. And when you're in those little microcosms of hockey, and I think that's one of the greatest things about our sport, is that you have these little moments where, like you saw what Minnesota hockey is. No, outside of Minnesota and probably USA hockey, they know a bit about it, but that's not on our radar. As a pro coach over in Europe, that's not on my radar. And you got to see how those kids are invested and the people that come out to watch it and the interest. You've been to a world championship, like the interest and the players and the national teams. I mean, maybe you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, no, I just here's the common thread I think is that, and I fear that we're moving away from this too much, especially at the youth levels. You're a great example, and I think a lot of people, Mike, would hear your background coming up in a small town and say, Mike Stewart couldn't have followed that same path and become the 13th overall pick in the National Hockey League draft, because he would have had to leave home earlier, play on some sort of elite team, and probably bounce around playing in a bunch of elite teams. But I think the common thread is that, I'm very familiar with sort of the structure when you talk about that quadrant in Hockey Calgary. So they all have a draw zone. So when you're growing up, it's not an option to play for the North Stars or the Royals or the Flames. Like you have to make the Calgary Buffaloes team if you want to play at a high level, and you aspire to that. So when you get there, you're right. It probably does feel like you have made it.
Yeah.
And you have so much pride because you've come up with these kids and you've jockeyed for positioning and all that. And I just believe that there's there's no analytics that can help us out on this one, but I believe there's a great power to be harnessed for kids coming up and playing within sort of a defined community, playing with their friends and having so much pride. Because the hockey I saw in Minnesota was just it was so good, and I think that I believe it's really important. I think it's and I like to think we have a small but influential platform on the coaches side. So we have to tell more stories of folks like you that did come from small towns, because we hear it all the time. Like I'll tell you this story, and I'm sure you can relate to this. So when I started coaching the BCHL, I spent a lot of time driving through the prairies. So between Manitoba and Alberta. And when you do that, every time you come to one of these small towns, it's like a Hollywood movie. There's the big sign that says "Welcome to some town," but then it says "Home of," and 99 out of 100 of those signs in Canada are home to an NHL player.
Sure.
And I worry that today we're taking that dream away from kids, or we're putting undue pressure on parents that think, hey, our kid can't grow up playing in the Foam Dome. We got to get a second mortgage out to go play somewhere else. And if you want to do that, that's great. But I think we have to we have to let people know that, hey, there's nothing wrong with the Foam Dome. If your kid is gifted, the cream will always rise to the top.
I think that's a great message, and I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, and that's the cost of it. There's a bunch of different ways where lanes.
There's a whole bunch, and you know what? Things evolve and things change. And I mean, man, it's funny. I mean, we're really fortunate to work very closely with the German Ice Hockey Federation, and I mean, we learn a ton from them because they have their own unique challenges, right? Because and primarily, I mean, they're competing with football or soccer, and that's a tough one. But so but back to your story. So you win the it's okay. You win the Air Canada Cup. And then you go to.
So I was 16, and here's the kind of you thought that there was something was deleted off of my elite prospects page. So played 2 years of AAA midget. We won it the last year, so I was my first year of midget. But my mom, and at the time this was the case, my mom found a loophole, because at that point, and again, this is the late 80s. As a Western kid, like, WHL, that's where I'm going to go play. That's what I'm going to do. But my parents put a very large priority on education, and that's when NCAA hockey was really coming into the fold. Where not just free agent signings that panned out. There were a couple first overall picks. I think Joe Murphy and guys like that. Jimmy Carson was another one. And anyways, the opportunity for a Canadian to go down was real, and we had scouts coming up and scouting from the NCAA, scouting our AAA midget team. And so it wasn't just me, but it was Brian Miller, who was a year older than me. He got a scholarship straight out of AAA midget after that year, went to Merrimack College. I had not finished high school, so he was a year earlier. And here's the rub. My mom found a loophole that no university in North America requires you to have a high school diploma. At that time, you needed your 5 matriculation courses, get good grades in them, and do well on your SAT. So I accelerated my high school educational path. So I didn't take shop, I didn't take gym, I didn't take home ec. I loaded up with my main courses. I basically did grade 11, grade 12 in one school year, plus took math 30 and English 30 in summer school. And that
Oh, Jesus, you're giving me anxiety.
Oh, it was brutal. And then going to the gym afterwards. So long story short, it worked. Michigan State offered me a scholarship. I turned 17 on May 30th, and that August I was down at Michigan State. And the kicker is I got down there. I had to sit out a week because a couple of the other teams that were recruiting me knew about me not having my high school diploma. I'm 9 credits short, but I didn't go to their school. So they put in a complaint with the NCAA.
No,
he doesn't have his high school diploma. He shouldn't be eligible to play. So during training camp, I had to sit around for a week until the NCAA came back and confirmed, hey, he's got his matriculation courses. He did well on the SAT. He is eligible to play for the Michigan State Spartans. So that's how I landed down in East Lansing.
Oh my God. So I have to, you've got kids, I've got kids. And sometimes like just in the routine aspects of life, I have to pause and remind my kids, I'm like, when I grew up, we didn't just like ask the phone, for the answer and get the answer in a snap of a finger. Like if we had to drive around looking for a rink in a foreign town, like you had to pull over at the gas station, you had to buy a map, like, all of this stuff. So, let's go back. So I think this is like circa 1989 we're talking
89
right
was
now.
my first year, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, take me back to like, you didn't get to go Google the campus. You probably got one of those media guides, but take me back to being 17 years old, jumping on a plane and walking into Lansing, Michigan.
The good thing was I was able to go on my trips, and I had 5 trips planned. The third one was at State. And once I went there and saw the campus, it was right in the sweet spot, like June, Southern Ontario and Michigan, that part of the Midwest, the weather's the same, and it was just gorgeous. The campus was amazing. I was blown away. So I committed right there and then. So, but flew down. And to be honest with you, Aaron, I'm blessed with blankness. You're young. You don't know. I'm going to play hockey. I'll take some classes while I'm down there. I wasn't intimidated because I was just blessed with blankness. I'm going to go down there and play hockey. It'll be fine, right?
Ignorance is bliss. Let's go.
Yo, sure, yeah. And so that first year, we had a great team. And these are names that maybe aren't on everybody's consciousness, but Kip Miller won the Hobey Baker that year, scored 48 goals as a senior at Michigan State. We were the number 1 ranked team for most of the year. And back then it was interesting. We had 3 first rounds. So Brian Smolinski and I went in the first round after our freshman year. Jason Mazzotti was down there as a first rounder. We had a bunch of second rounders, third rounders. Like it was just that's when NCAA hockey was really taking off. And so back to the team, and we ended up losing out Billy Guerin in BC that year, which was a huge, like we were the favorites, everything else. And ironically, years later, this is how small the hockey world is. My assistant coach, Gary Shuchuk, went to Wisco, University of Wisconsin back then. They had a great team. They won it that same year that Kip Miller scores 48.
Who was I on?
Chris Tansel. They had
Don Granato was just on the show talking about that.
Okay,
he was on
they're thick as
Small
thieves.
world, man. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyways, played my sophomore year, was drafted, went back to school, played my sophomore year, and then I ran into some really unlucky injury problems. I had a complicated knee surgery, came back from that. I had a complicated break in my foot. I have a steel pin in my foot for the rest of my life, and basically played 8 games in a year and a half. And then I was drafted by the Rangers. They were of the opinion, Mike, listen, let's turn pro. You're 20 years old. You're eligible. No, you're probably not going to make our team, but we want you playing 80 games. Let's get you 70 games. We need to kind of catch up on the reps. And so I did that, and it was that was the beginning of my bumping around the American League. And there's a bunch. I mean, as you can imagine, 8 years in the minors. There's a ton of stories there, and was coached by great people, played with great people. It was in hindsight, never made the NHL, but I'm past that now. And when I think back about the experiences that I had, I played a year. Sorry, I was disgruntled with my lot in life, and I played a year with the year-round Team Canada, Hockey Canada program.
Yeah, Dean
Ian
Evanson
Murray
was on
our
that
coach.
team, and yeah,
Mike Johnston I saw is speaking at TCS
Sure is,
this
yeah.
summer. He was a coach of mine, great hockey mind. And so the path kind of went on, and I went 8 years in the minors, met my wife. We were freshly married, went over to Frankfurt to Europe, and said, we'll give it a year and see what happens. Well, shit, that's 25 years ago now.
That's unbelievable. I'd be curious. So, like, from that time when you step on campus at Lansing, and again, things have changed. I mean, there's websites dedicated to the draft and so much news and attention. But what was the trajectory of you stepping foot on campus and then all of a sudden being like, "Hey, I think I might get drafted," to like, "I think I might get drafted high," to like,
yeah, the hockey
smoke,
news and Central Scouting used to come out. We were glued to it, and Central Scouting came around and they wanted your height and weights, and you couldn't fudge it. But we found a way. We'd roll up a little bit of tape underneath our socks, put it on the heel underneath our socks.
Come on, that's amazing.
Gain us a quarter of an inch. I like to say that I'm 6'3", but I'm not. I'm 6'2 3/4. But
yeah,
a little bit of tape in your socks couldn't fudge your weight. But that's kind of where it started. And we had guys like Rob Woodward, Wes McCauley. Actually, well, Wes McCauley, best referee in the world. He was our teammate at Michigan State as well. Brian Smolenski. Yeah, and the world was different.
Was he a big personality back then? Like when he makes the calls, you're like, that makes.
That's Wes. That's not a show. That's pure Wes. 100%. That's not him saying I got to get into character. No, Wes is a beauty. He always has been.
Oh man, I feel every time I watch him, I'm like, he could have done this, or he could have been a professional wrestler and would have excelled at either or.
Great at it.
You were coached by Colin Campbell, I believe, as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. I think we forget that he's had what a career in the game he's had.
Oh, it's unreal. But even then, it was interesting because, help me out here. Roger Nielsen was the coach in New York with Colin Campbell, okay, in with the Rangers. And this is something you'll never see in the NHL these days, at least I don't think. Basically, our coaches in the American League were called up. They fired Roger. They called Smith. Ron Smith, Al Hill were our coaches. The New York Rangers called our coaching staff up. And then Colin Campbell was his assistant with Roger at the time, and they said, "Listen, we need fresh blood. You want to go down and take over the American League team." So that's how Soupy ended up coming to us. Was basically, being called up and sent down, even as coaches back then.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah,
that's unbelievable. Mike, I'd be curious too, just given where you've spent, I guess all of your professional coaching life. Any exposure to other sports or coaches in other sports, and if so, what might have you stolen from them?
Yeah, this last little bit in Augsburg had some exposure to the soccer team, some exposure to handball is really big over in particular northern Germany and up through the Scandinavian countries. Had some exposure to some of their coaches, but the best was an English guy. When I was in Wolfsburg 2 years ago, he was an assistant coach with the Bundesliga Mannschaft team. And he had to fulfill his requirements for his English top coaching license. He needed to work in a different sport and not in England, which was perfect. So there's a sports complex where our arena and the soccer stadium is, and it's like 400 meters apart from each other. So his name was Aaron. We called him AA Ron. He got a kick out of how informal.
Yeah, I've heard that occasionally.
Yeah, informal hockey coaches are. Yeah. So, and just picking his brain about the technological advancements in soccer that they use, with whether it be during practice, how they track their athletes, and we've gone that far too. We use First Beat. We track our athletes, how they sleep, their recovery phase. The central nervous system readings in order to see if maybe the the load has been too much over the last week and we need to back off of our on ice and off ice training. There's a lot of different tools that we use, and I know that throughout pro hockey they're used, but that's also been part of my education as you come up. And I was in Austria, which was pretty mom and pop, to be honest, as far as the technological side of things. Second league in Germany, it was a bit better. Then you get into the DEL, and we've been working with a bunch of different tracking systems for our athletes, tried to just win the centimeter, win an extra inch. You talked about we talked about thinking outside the box, right? That's also part of it. Like, if we're going to use technology, and luckily our ownership our GM is willing to invest in it. So we're trying to win that extra inch with even how we steuer. Sometimes I have trouble getting the German.
That's okay.
how we're gonna maneuver our team individually and as a group through the whole season. So when that puck drops, that we're at peak readiness, that they're at peak readiness. It doesn't matter whether it's their sleep, nutrition, but the tracking systems that we use, it all comes together. And after the practice, I get, it's not like the NHL analytics. It's not like that, but I get about 4 or 5 different pieces of paper with the data that we've collected throughout practice and through the morning workouts. And I review it with my performance coach to see if there's anybody that's maybe hurting a little bit or somebody that needs a little bit extra to maximize his performance. And so a lot of that's almost like it's sports science, right? And that's also part of what coaches need to understand these days.
No, I think everyday coaches in our sport are becoming more and more like CEOs. Like they're just managing information and managing vision and direction, and there's just so much going on beneath the surface. And I think what you just described there, that fight to get, that 1% better, I think it's so compelling. And I think in our sport in particular, like we're just scratching the surface relative to, as you said, in football or basketball and other sports. Mike, I'd be curious, just as we wrap here, any other influences, resources that you have found valuable as you've navigated through your coaching journey?
One of the, there are a ton of books and a ton of resources out there. Yeah. And I think for me, honestly, this is one of the things that resonates with me the most. And it's not new, but it just resonates with me. Being authentic. Like you as a coach, doesn't matter what level, me as a coach, going out there, being authentic, always being curious, those two things. Players are like, I was liking them to, it has nothing to do with, it's like jungle intelligence, right? They can smell it on you. If you're not being yourself, or if you don't have their best interests at heart, they can smell it. And you want buy-in, you want guys to believe in your vision and go out there and battle with each other or for each other. Those kind of things, like being authentic and being curious. And if you're an emotional guy, be emotional. We always have to rein it in at times. But then if you're an introvert and you're super smart with system, like play to your strengths, be yourself, because that's what players respond to. If you care for them, you keep on learning, and you're authentic.
Bam. What a way to close.
No, Mike, thanks, buddy. That was great.
Hey, listen, I'm speak for everybody. We're so excited to get you on stage at TCS Live. Not to throw any curveballs, but based on this conversation, like I wonder if maybe there's a theme around 2-on-1s that you'd be uniquely positioned to talk about. But that is TBD. But otherwise, thanks so much for spending time with us. This has been awesome.
I appreciate it. Thanks for the opportunity. And I listened to your podcast, and it's amazing what you've built up, Aaron. Truly,
Appreciate that.
It's a great tool, and it's interesting.